Since we have spent much time on internal combustion rolling stock, let us turn our attention to electric traction. In electric rolling stock, the performance of DC traction motors had already reached a level fully adequate for conventional lines, and the control system's complex mechanical cam mechanisms operating with high precision functioned reliably. There was little room for eccentric or experimental technology. However, electric locomotives faced a different reality. With the rise of EMUs, demand for high-speed passenger trains hauled by locomotives had disappeared, and freight traffic in rural areas was declining. Electric locomotives seemed almost overqualified for their duties. Yet one place remained, the Usui Pass, a main line with Japan's steepest gradient, which posed a major obstacle to increasing transport capacity. Before the war, the pass had been conquered using the ABT rack system and electrified early. But no fundamental solution had been adopted afterward to eliminate the steep gradient. The ABT system limited speed, and to overcome the pass using normal adhesion, the EF62 and EF63 were developed. The EF63, designed specifically for the Usui Pass, incorporated extremely unconventional technology to ensure that it could always stop safely on the descent. Climbing the steep gradient was not particularly difficult. Even with resistance control, the introduction of vernier control allowed smooth torque regulation with minimal fluctuation, greatly reducing the risk of wheel slip compared with older locomotives. But descending safely was a far greater challenge. Relying on friction brakes would require overcoming the same problem that plagued the EF15 on the Ataya Pass, overheating of wheels leading to tire loosening and detachment. Electric locomotives therefore used dynamic braking, but absolute reliability was required. DC regenerative braking, which depended on other trains consuming the returned power, could not be used. Conventional locomotive braking resistors were designed for short-duration loads to reduce weight. But on the Usui Pass, dynamic braking had to operate at nearly full power for long periods. Thus, the EF63 was equipped with massive resistors capable of continuously dissipating 2,500 kilowatts. Traditional cooling methods could not support such capacity, so dedicated blowers were installed for forced cooling, ensuring adequate heat dissipation. The cooling system could be powered by the electricity generated during dynamic braking, allowing the locomotive to descend safely even during a power outage without overheating the resistors. Furthermore, the EF63 was equipped with electromagnetic track brakes, which used magnetic attraction to increase effective axle load and thus frictional braking force. These magnets could also be powered from dynamic braking electricity, and backup batteries were installed to ensure stopping capability under all conditions. Of course, many measures were also incorporated to improve climbing performance. While the through-service EF62 had an axle load of 16 tons, the EF63 was given 18 tons to increase adhesion. In rainy weather, the locomotive had to operate with tractive effort near the adhesion limit, and if the main locomotive and helper produced mismatched tractive effort, coordinated operation would fail. To prevent this, an automatic notch advancing system based on current limits, essentially the same control method used on EMUs, was adopted for the locomotive. To measure speed accurately even during wheel slip or slide, a separate small wheel with a diameter of 30 centimeters was installed, allowing precise low-speed detection. When speed exceeded the prescribed limit, a warning was sent to the driver, and if it rose further, the emergency brake was applied automatically. When the electromagnetic track brake was activated, it produced an attraction force of 17.5 tons, effectively increasing axle load and improving adhesion by about 15%. Because the EF63 had to couple to various EMUs and DMUs on the Karuizawa side, the Karuizawa side end of the locomotive was equipped with multiple jumper sockets compatible with different train types. Initially, coupling was limited to 8 cars due to coupler strength concerns, but this was insufficient to meet rising transport demand. Therefore, limited express and express EMUs were equipped with coordination circuits allowing them to be controlled from the EF63. This enabled 12 car formations while maintaining balanced forces at the coupling, meeting the increased demand. Later, as passenger car and freight train operations declined, self-powered EMUs capable of climbing the pass were studied. However, developing and assigning dedicated rolling stock was financially impossible for JNR, and with the opening of the Shinkansen, the conventional line over the pass was closed. Resistance control technology, long established and stable, was still adopted for locomotives of unprecedented performance. This was the EF66, and during the JNR era, no locomotive surpassed it. Its performance was, for its time, truly extraordinary. Although JNR's freight operations were declining, high-speed container transport on major trunk lines still offered a viable future. The container express services that began with the EH10 initially operated at 85 km per hour, but further speed increases were desired. Electric locomotives evolved from the new performance EF60 to the EF65, achieving EH10 class output in an F-type locomotive. With a low gear ratio suitable for freight and the use of field weakening, 110 km per hour operation became possible, raising expectations for faster container express services. However, with this passenger freight dual-purpose design that emphasized low-speed performance, the locomotive lost to the EF58 in high-speed tractive effort. Even a 500-ton sleeping car limited express could barely reach 110 km per hour unless it used downhill sections, and hauling freight trains exceeding 1,000 tons at high speed was extremely difficult. For this reason, locomotives capable of multiple-unit control were developed, and high-speed freight was handled by double-heading. But this double-heading operation consumed more than 5,000 kilowatts, and on the Sennayo main lines except east of Himeji substations lacked sufficient capacity, making proper operation impossible. To solve this problem, the EF66 was introduced. Its traction motor output was increased to 650 kilowatts, a figure that must have seemed monstrous at the time. This allowed a 1,000-ton container train to run at 100 km per hour. With a single unit output of 3,900 kilowatts, the locomotive could operate across the Takedo and Sennayo main lines without worrying about substation capacity. Combined with the simplicity of single-unit operation, it became the star of high-speed freight service. This output was the highest in the world for narrow-gauge rolling stock at the time. Although adhesion limits prevented improvement in low-speed performance, the gear ratio was optimized to make full use of the enormous power in the medium to high-speed range. The EF66 delivered performance comparable to double-heading EF58s, something unimaginable for a freight locomotive. Reflecting this exceptional performance, the EF66 was given a body design unprecedented among JNR electric locomotives. The headlights and taillights were integrated and placed on both sides of the front, reminiscent of the Kodama EMUs. The front emblem plate featured decorations similar to those used on limited express EMUs. The front end shape closely resembled the early DD54 style, a refined, angular face with slanted upper side panels, giving the impression of a futuristic electric locomotive. Although demand for high-speed container trains initially lagged, it grew steadily, and expectations rose for even longer and heavier trains. Building on EF66 technology, development of an EH-type locomotive was considered, and in the future, the adoption of thyristor chopper control was expected to greatly improve adhesion and electrical efficiency. In both design and engineering, the DD54 and EF66 stood far apart from typical JNR rolling stock. It is not unreasonable to say they deserve a place among the eccentric machines of Japan's railway history. However, as AC electrification advanced, engineers became fascinated by the dream of the induction motor. In the process, they created what could be called the pinnacle of eccentric technology, the hydraulic transmission EMU mentioned earlier. Yet in the end, even on AC lines, the conventional DC traction motor remained dominant, and development became less adventurous. Still, in the field of power control, a completely new idea was beginning to emerge. This new concept controlled traction motor output not by voltage, but by the duration of current flow, a fundamentally different approach. In the early days of AC electrification, mercury arc rectifiers were used to convert AC to DC for DC traction motors. These devices were relatives of vacuum tubes and possessed power amplification capability. Power amplification meant that a small electrical signal could control a much larger electrical power source. By switching this signal on and off, the main power circuit could be controlled. When rectifying AC, this on-off control was combined with transformer tap changing, enabling extremely smooth traction motor control. With minimal torque fluctuation, wheel slip became less likely. Compared with conventional DC resistance control, which switched resistors in steps, this method achieved far higher adhesion, allowing a D-type axle arrangement to deliver starting performance comparable to an F-type locomotive. This system seemed poised to revolutionize traction power control. But its weakness lay in the mercury arc rectifier itself. It could not operate if too hot or too cold, and its delicate glass structure with fine electrodes was vulnerable to vibration, a serious drawback for railway vehicles. The equipment was large, maintenance was demanding, and while a single locomotive could accommodate it, EMUs with multiple control cars could not. Amid these difficulties, a breakthrough appeared in semiconductor technology. A new device emerged, the thyristor, a rectifier element that ignored transistor-like amplification and specialized solely in on-off switching. With very low internal resistance when on, it controlled power more efficiently than mercury arc rectifiers. As long as heating was managed, it required almost no maintenance, had no contacts to polish, and was compact and lightweight, a dream electronic switch. With this device, on-off power control became feasible even for EMUs. However, the thyristor was extremely temperamental. Although it could be turned on with a tiny signal, it could not be turned off easily. It turned off only when current ceased. Once off, it stayed off without any signal. In AC circuits, where current direction reverses periodically, the thyristor naturally turned off after each half cycle. But in DC circuits, where current flows continuously, turning it off required a special commutation circuit using additional thyristors, capacitors, and coils. This made the control circuitry large and complex. Still, if DC on-off control could be achieved, power conversion with low losses similar to a transformer became possible, enabling energy-efficient DC rolling stock far superior to resistance-controlled trains. Because this on-off control chopped the current sharply, it became known as chopper control and was expected to become the future of DC traction. But this system also had problems. Rapid high-frequency switching produced strong electromagnetic noise, raising concerns about interference with vital signaling systems and even with the power grid on AC lines. Noise suppression measures eventually mitigated these issues, but one problem remained: cost. For JNR, already in terminal financial decline, replacing the entire fleet of stable, reliable resistance-controlled DC EMUs was impossible. Before chopper control could spread, its place was overtaken by induction motor inverter drive systems. The vehicles introduced in this chapter lacked comical appearances. Each was a refined machine created to meet new demands through new technologies. In the sense that they broke with JNR's traditional norms, they were indeed eccentric. But another wave of innovation was approaching. Once again, technologies that surpassed conventional wisdom were on the horizon: car body tilting systems, and in internal combustion traction, the adoption of the extraordinary gas turbine.